It's about giving the next generation the right confidence and leadership skills and drive to achieve what the top leaders in the security industry have done and what they're continuing to do.
Welcome to the Circuit Magazine, the #1 source of information on protection matters, the industry-leading magazine for all security professionals who want to stay ahead of the game.
Young professionals' success in corporate security. Today, Jon Moss and myself are delighted to be interviewing Leo Kelly, who, as a young professional, next generation in the London scene, has recently taken a career break to reassess things. Jon, we were all young once, and arguably we still are young. Why are we doing a session on YPs today?
Well, the biggest aim and goal for me in this is not to feel old and like a dinosaur. Assuming I can get through that, okay, then I think it's really essential that we keep touch with the young professionals who are coming into the industry. We have to accept, they're a different generation. There's different things that have influenced them to come into the industry, different drivers, and they have different needs to some part as well. And so this is the future of the security industry. And it's not like passing the baton on and we retire and they take over. There is a natural transition and integration, and we will be working alongside these young professionals. And so it's just as important for us to understand them and make it ourselves accessible to ensure the success of the mission and the industry in the long term.
Absolutely, because there's always going to be some sort of stereotypes or prejudices. Oh, young people are ... And just as people say, oh, older people are ... And today, people are talking about the Great Resignation. We're talking about Gen Z in a particular different way than maybe millennials and Gen X. And I mean, it's always going to be there. But then a security manager has to think, right, I'll rise above it. How do I integrate them into my team? How do I create success? How do I make sure that we can get the most out of each and every person, which is, why we're very pleased to have Leo on. Obviously, Leo, very active in the UK ASIS young professionals scene. And actually, he's come from a slightly different background. He did a master's in risk, and he did not come from the police or the military, which I think has been a recurring theme of some of the podcasts, hasn't it, Jon? The non-traditional career paths and actually coming with some academic credentials first. That's more popular these days, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke about the non-traditional there, but actually, I think it is becoming more commonplace to see this entry point into the industry. A lot of people who will be listening to this might have come into the industry as a result of the big expansion that we've seen in the last 20 years. And the entry point for them will be very different. So I think it's really interesting to have Leo on and to hear the experience of somebody coming into the industry from this academic route and choosing a career path rather than just falling into it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And many people fall into it. Many people gravitate towards it. But, the professionalization of security is a testament to people choosing it, seeking it out, which is rather nice. And after all, we've talked a lot about people's eventual career paths as risk managers. Well, hey, masters in risk management to start with. That is a good precedent. So I'm sure many people in the UK already know Leo, but it's nice to introduce him and the YP question to our wider EP audience. Let's get into it and look at corporate security success as a young professional, next generation individual with Leo Kelly.
And now, let's meet one of the contributors to the Circuit Magazine.
Young Professional Success in Corporate Security. Today, we are delighted to be joined by Leo Kelly, a young professional from the corporate security scene, now on a little career break. Jon Moss and myself, really pleased to have you on. How are you doing, Leo?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Well, it's great. It's great for you to join, especially in the middle of your career break. And I think this is a great time to get a snapshot for the older generation about what the younger generation is going through, is needing, how to integrate with them, how to communicate with them. But equally, for the younger crowd, a lot of the different voices and perspectives that corporate and executive security are going through right now. So what is the problem that we are trying to solve, or you're trying to solve, with young professionals in corporate security right now?
It's a great question. I think trying to avoid ageism as much as possible and giving young professionals as many opportunities as possible, which the security industry I think is good for, but more broadly in the world of work, I think lots of young professionals just appreciate the opportunity and the opportunity to shine while they grow their career. And for so many young people like myself, we love to have a manager who will put us first, give us responsibility to get on with tasks and take ownership for these, rather than be micromanaged or kind of like as a work experience candidate or someone who is just there in the shadows and makes things look pretty, but to be given responsibility and to take accountability for their projects.
I think we can all appreciate that. We've all been there at some stage.
Yeah.
And what about you? Where does your passion for security and now being a YP come from?
I think it all comes down to protecting and helping people. So something I've been reflecting on in the last few months that I've had off away from the industry for a few months is, if everything is going smoothly and everything is going well, there's no real major hiccups, and that's a success. And that's that sort of peace, and keeping the peace is important to me, and that's what the security industry does so well. That reassurance and protection of people to help them, their assets, well-being, etc.
Okay, and then, I mean, usually I'd say, what about the uninitiated? But as I sort of alluded, we were all younger once. What about the older generation that may have forgotten what it is like to be younger, and maybe the younger generation not yet in security? What should they better understand about this YP? And I think ASIS now calls it next gen sort of cadre of colleagues.
Sure. I think it's interesting because we're all pretty similar. We're all the same. We're all human beings here. The next gen, I think, is a good way of now reframing the cohort of young professionals, because it's about giving the next generation the right confidence and leadership skills and drive to achieve what the top leaders in the security industry have done and what they're continuing to do. So I think at the end of the day, we're all pretty similar, and the leadership has been in the young professional shoes. It's just about growing that and giving them enough support to be able to achieve like they have.
So I just kind of want to start with some really basic things to set the scene, to get a bit of a background. So first of all, I think, seeing as we're talking about young professionals, it would be good to know how old you are.
Sure. So I'm 26 at the moment.
So not quite still in diapers. I mean,
No.
you have a certain amount of life experience behind you. And so what I wanted to know was, what attracted you to the security industry? I mean, was it a conscious decision? Did you just find yourself in this career path? As many of us do, I think a lot of listeners will appreciate that. Even those who were in the military and police won't necessarily have known that a career in the security industry is what lay ahead for them. So yeah, why were you drawn to the security industry?
So I think it comes back to the protection of people and helping people. That's the crux of it. That's the main satisfaction, I would say, from working in the industry. If I was to break it down a little bit more, I did a master's in risk and focused on counter-terrorism, and through that, I developed my interest and my passion for the security industry. And I did a lot of research on protecting educational establishments from terrorism and then the measures they put in. And that was, I'd say, the gateway in my master's dissertation maybe 5 years ago now, as to how I started in the industry. And then things developed, and I met a lot of amazing people who helped me out, and one thing led to another, and then I had four and a bit amazing years so far in the industry, and hopefully that continues from the new year onwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, growing up in this world, in this time with everything that's going on, what was it that influenced that decision to take a master's in risk management and counterterrorism?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I grew up in an era where we had 9/11 when I was 6, and then we had 7/7 attacks in London when I was 9. So throughout my childhood, I felt like terrorism on a very big international, scary scale, and was very prevalent in my childhood, particularly having grown up in London during the 7/7 attacks and being there with my family at the time. And then these things carried on, and it was always something that I was really interested in. And then throughout my undergraduate, I wrote a lot about terrorism and read up a lot about counterterrorism. As the passion, I think, stemmed from childhood in terms of how can we protect these things, how can we protect people from these disastrous events happening, and mitigating them as best as we can. And then that sort of develops over many years into my desire to join the security industry to do something about it, perhaps.
And, you know, certainly if there was any doubt that you qualify as a young professional, that certainly put it into perspective to hear that you were 6 at the time of 9/11. I remember myself, I was actually guard commander. I was still in the military, and I was guard commander on that very day. And yeah, so you can imagine. So certainly grown up at a time when there's been so much going on in terms of geopolitics and the terrorism threats that we've all lived with in these latter years. But for you, it's been your life. And I think from the perspective of somebody who's been in the industry slightly longer, and especially come from a military background, that informed a lot of, you know, my decision making and reasoning for being in this industry. On one hand, it could seem strange that young people have gravitated to the industry through these influences, but I think hearing it in your own words, it kind of makes sense, and it's certainly an impressive thing to hear that we have young people of your caliber who are coming into the industry with a real purpose and want to make a change. And you know, with that said, what is it that you see? I know it's early days, but where do you see your career trajectory? Where do you see yourself going, and what is it that you want to accomplish?
That's another great question. I'd say I'd love to one day be, with a lot of hard work, to be maybe a chief risk officer or potentially chief security officer, depending on which avenue my career goes down. And then as time goes on, maybe like a non-executive board director, something like that. But this is maybe 30 years away. In the meantime, just continue to work hard, and I'm sure my passions in security and risk management, operational resilience will carry on. And yeah, I think I'd also love to work abroad, and this experience of being abroad for nearly 6 months now in Latin America has taught me that there's so much great opportunity in London, which I have missed, but it's also been great to experience different cultures, and I'd like to do this again as well at some point in my life.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll return a lot richer for those experiences. Yeah. And speaking of experience, as we mentioned, came into this through an academic route, and, you know, not coming through a military or police type background. And what do you think you gained by coming at it through an academic route and maybe not having the institutional influences of coming
through a more military route?
Yeah, that's another great question. I'd say the disadvantage of not coming through a police or a military route, like so many people in the industry have, is understanding and being aware of that very real sense of risk that you would feel in those environments, whether you're trying to arrest someone or you're running an exercise or you're camping in the rain for 9 days. Like those kind of things you don't really get in academia, or those kind of real threat of risk and how to manage that under high pressure. That's
Glastonbury doesn't count then, though.
Yeah. But then the advantage of the more academic side to have come from, I would argue, it does give you a better understanding of some of the concepts for security, how to communicate, present. I'm sure these things are learned in the police and military, but for me personally, those were skills for me that were honed a lot as well from the academic side. So if you think about security and risk management as a business enabler and more broadly fitting in with the organization, I think so many of those skills and the soft skills you get from the academic side, I personally learned a lot there that helped me in my career.
And I know it's early days, but at this stage, what are the challenges that you've identified? Where do you see the potential speed bumps that lay ahead, and what are you doing to counter those, if indeed there are any?
Okay, so I think speaking to people who have had maybe 30 years experience is becoming stale in a job, perhaps, and knowing when to move on, knowing when to quit. And there are obviously so many great opportunities in staying fresh and enjoying yourself in those opportunities. I think is often a hard decision to make in terms of how much have I got out of this. And I often feel like leaving at the right time when things are still relatively good is an important decision, because if you drag it out and if you like really get too comfortable in a role, I think that's in some ways a risk. I would argue that a good dancer always knows when to leave the stage. If you stay too long, it's gonna fizzle out, no matter how good you are. So that's a speed bump potentially that I could see in the road. Another speed bump for that matter is not having the right role at all and being unsatisfied and so those are the two things I'd say.
Yeah, I think these are really relevant. I think it's great that you've identified them so early on, but then maybe that's not the biggest challenge. Perhaps it's avoiding them, because for sure these are two big things that really do exist within the security industry. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to look far to see people who are suffering with both of those challenges and don't necessarily know where to turn, or perhaps have lost the confidence and the maneuverability within their careers, or at least as they perceive it. So I think these are really important things to think about early on. I certainly applaud you for identifying those. So given that you have these fantastic insights already, what would your message be to any other young aspiring professionals, perhaps who aren't certain about a career in the security industry? What would your message to those be for why they should give it consideration?
I think the security industry, from my experience in London, is incredible. England more broadly is so welcoming, and so I found that the industry has always been incredibly accommodating for whoever you are, and to that end, I've always found it so easy and natural to make friends in the industry. I feel like it's the only one I've ever worked in, but I can imagine a lot more industries are unfriendly and there's a bit more bravado about it, which I don't feel exists in the security industry. I feel like everyone is incredibly honest and says it how it is, which I think is really important. And that is an attractive quality of the industry and why a young professional should work there. I also think, going back to my earlier point around why do I work in the security industry, it's it's down to helping people, protecting people, and if that's for you, then I'd highly recommend it. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say that my experience might be slightly different, but that could be potentially more to do with our respective backgrounds and the routes in which we've come into the industry. Yeah. Also, you're entering the security industry from a very different point of entry than that which I did. Yeah. I still find that a lot of my colleagues and the environments and the method of operation, it's still very quasi-military. It's that attitude of, why throw out something that works for you? And when I came into the industry, as a lot of my peers did, it was as a reaction to 9/11, and it created an opportunity, and there was a huge demand. And whenever you get those types of situations, people flood in, and there isn't necessarily the structure. And so you have to start to make that yourself. You have to create the environment and the right set of operating conditions. And so naturally, if you're coming from the military and you have, very formulaic ways of doing things, then you will bring those in with you. And so, I think my transition and experience is it dilutes over time, and you start to feel that this has its own personality, this has its own identity, but very much built on those foundations. So for me, listening to you speak now, it's really an education, and it's eye-opening as well to realize that there are other routes and other practices and ways in which, you can operate in this industry.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I have always felt like a bit of an outlier to some extent in the industry, having not come from operational security or police or the military background. But it's always been a positive. It's not held me back. It's just been a different angle of approach.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. There are some burdens that come with that as well. And I think being able to come in with fresh eyes, and you will see things that other people might miss. Conversely, you don't have a lot of the experience, but you're coming into an industry where that exists. And like you say, your experience has been, it's a very friendly security industry, people who want to help you. And so having all of that experience around you, and if you're receptive to it, then you can only grow with that. So I think you're adopting a fantastic model and building a great career path in these early days.
Thank you.
So now that we've gotten to know you as an audience, of course, I've known you for a while. It might be nice, and admittedly, this is under the theme of young professionals, how to appreciate them, how to think where they're coming from. Your own background recently, in the recent years, has been noteworthy. And I mention that because where you last worked, you did have to take on lots of extra responsibilities, which, sometimes people might shirk, and sometimes, in your case, very, very luckily, you seem to have thrived. What can you speak to that and that period? What can you tell us? What would you like to share? Personal anecdotes as well, but also, I guess, was it easy to take on those responsibilities? Was it a choice even, or was it conscious?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'd say it definitely wasn't easy. For context, my previous manager passed away, and there was then a big hole in the team. Who he had 5 different direct reports essentially, and so there was a lot of stepping up that had to be done amongst the team, and it was definitely a team effort. It definitely wasn't all me, and there were a lot of gaps which I stepped up into, but it ended up being a very sad time. However, over the months following his death, it was a great development opportunity in terms of I learned a lot at the time, and dealing with things in uncertain times and adverse times, it makes you grow. And then a few months after his death came the pandemic, so everything felt like it was on full blast in terms of growing and workload. So it was a weird time, but it was one it was a weird time, and I wish he was still around, of course, Mr. Clark. But and I'm sure if he was listening to this, he'd be happy that we're doing this, as he was passionate about ACES and the development of young professionals, and he was a great man for those reasons, and many others. So yeah, it was a very sad time, but you learn to adapt and change in those circumstances.
And so, would you recommend other people attempt to seek out extra responsibilities in areas that they're not comfortable with? I mean, I enjoyed, enjoyed's a strong word. I benefited from having to do the finance side of work. That's been a very useful string to my bow. Even though it's not my background. Would you recommend seeking out more things like that?
I think so, but only to a degree. I think there's things like doing your accounts or learning a different wing of the security industry that you might not feel so comfortable with. I think that's good to dip into, but if it really doesn't make you happy and you're not really enjoying it, I feel like there's a point of no return. So I think, try and look for some basic skills in that area and be open to them, but don't take away everything that you enjoy about your role by committing to that, which is very easy to do, to get lost in an area which you're not so passionate about, but is really useful and helpful. So trying to balance it with things you enjoy, because I think that's the most important thing with work in the security industry. If you're not enjoying it, you're not happy, then you need to reconsider it, I think.
This is often seen as the trade-off between career development and enjoyment of the role. And I don't think it needs to be at the sacrifice of one or the other, though it often is. And often we do it more willingly than I think we realize. And yeah, that's quite a trade-off. And it's really great point that you've highlighted. And I think anyone, no matter where they are, sat in their career listening to this today, could do well to remind themselves of that the job can still be one that you enjoy, as well as having progression in it.
Yeah, that's the ideal sweet spot. Yeah.
And Leo, you seem to have mastered, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, you seem to have mastered the art of, I suppose, being a little bit more humble than people are used to expecting young professionals to be. I say this with the wonderful preconception that all fresh-faced professionals are, headed to be the CSO tomorrow. And, there is that kind of attitude that some in the industry sort of believe exists. I don't know if it does. I know that perhaps I was a little bit guilty of it at the beginning. This is sort of like a question-compliment, right? I'm complimenting you and saying that you've mastered the art of being a bit more humble. But what would your advice be to, let's say, 21-year-old security professional who's basically chomping at the bit and going, "You don't understand. I am CSO material. I can be the CSO today." I mean, how can we curb their enthusiasm but not extinguish their passion?
I mean, if someone's saying that, I would say prove it. Like, prove you can do that job.
But you just give me a chance. Give me a chance, and I'll lead the entire organization tomorrow. And I've never done anything in my life, but I exaggerate.
I mean, I admire their confidence. That's just not realistic, even for someone of that age, and unless they started when they were 14 and they're some sort of super kid, it's unlikely. But if someone is really saying that, I feel like you should give them the benefit of the doubt to an extent, but don't believe everything you hear. You often hear and read CVs that say top class professional, or like interesting adjectives to describe themselves, and you kind of need to look a bit through the layers of that and understand like what metrics have you achieved to determine those adjectives. And I think people are entitled to say that, but if you are going to say that, back that up with some quantitative proof that or some experience to demonstrate that. I think selling yourself and putting yourself out there, marketing is so important, but just having the meat on the bones as well to demonstrate that is even more important.
And that meat on the bone, maybe you can achieve with tenure. And I know before you spoke about don't get stale, right? Don't stagnate.
Yeah.
But there seems to be, and this happened to me in the great crash of 07, 08. I was coming up against people who were scared for their jobs because of the economic environment.
Yeah.
And I had to really pitch my inclusion in their organization very carefully. And I was not very careful. So I learned how to be a bit more careful. I'm being, nebulous on purpose. How can we balance that? So is tenure important? Is tenure relevant? And if it is, how can we, without being stale and tenured, how can we balance tenured with skills and fresh but enthusiasm and skills?
That is the perfect combination. I found so far that learning, taking courses, networking, meeting people is for me that thing that keeps me excited and motivated. I think that's really important. And looking back on the best times in my career journey so far, they were at an ACES seminar or a Crisis 24 webinar or one of Phelim Rowe's securitization or modernization events. So these things you can. That's for me as a social person and someone who enjoys networking and learning from others. That's where the real fun comes. But that might be only 2 or 3 hours in a week where you're working hard and looking at different documentation and it being very analytical, which is also enjoyable and interesting. So it's a balance, but I think keeping that balance is really important and not being chained to your desk for 40 hours a week or more and getting out there and meeting people is that's what brings it all together, I think.
Yeah, and as long as I suppose you approach it with that perspective and with good heart, good motivations, I think people will maybe not actually question age. They'll be like, yes, Leo is X or Y and Z, and he'll fit into the team. But again, I'm thinking, listeners, some, let's say they're in their 40s and they're struggling, and then they're like, wow, there's a bit of a bottleneck, isn't there? Because I've got competition from people who are fresh out of college, people in their 30s, people in their 60s, people in their 90s. Okay, maybe not 90s, but I think if we could solve that on this podcast, we'd be rich. Okay, but I throw it out there because I know that some listeners are thinking, hang on, I have an issue too. I have stumbled in my career. Maybe I've hit a block or something like that. So maybe then let's ask a more productive question. So regardless of age, how can we create a team of security operators or security professionals where we're not questioning age? How would you advocate for that? I know you're not in charge of massive teams, but if you were to get them in a room and say, look, this would really help, so no one goes, oh, young Leo or something like that. How can we just have a team of different tenures?
Yeah, changing that narrative, I think, would be really important. I think it's about being consistent over a year, 2 years more, because once you're consistent after that period of time, you do have to put the groundwork in, of course, like anyone's like any job at any new age. But once you put that in, I think they can come that sense of respect and that's really important for a professional, especially when they're starting out. So just being consistent and polite, and I think that goes a long way, because they'll soon realise that you're just as capable, despite not being quite so experienced. But your brain is still as good, if not better than some. So, and you can bring fresh and new ideas. So there's lots of positives that can be drawn from a next gen professional that I'd encourage lots of people to believe.
But why are, and here's the prejudice, some of your year group, some of your age group engaging in the great resignation? Now that's a loaded question, because maybe they're not. Maybe they're actually not.
Yeah, I think something I've learned, particularly having taken some time away from the working world, is throughout COVID, we were told to follow so many rules. You have to be in bed at this time. You can't go out. And everyone, particularly in the younger generation, felt so stifled. And I'm sure so many people in the world did. And I think there was this great sense that, well, we've had to follow all these rules in society for so long. And a lot of people saved up a lot of money in that time. So now I want to enjoy myself because I don't know how long this is going to last. Like, a lot of people lost relatives in COVID and friends, and I think COVID gave people a long time to reflect on their lives and what was important to them and what made them happy. So in that time, so many people have thought, right, once this is over, like, I really want to enjoy my life. And that's not to say work can't enjoy that, but I think the last 2 years demonstrated, 2 or 3 years now, demonstrated how much it was almost like all hands on deck to get us through COVID. And now it's over. People and my contemporaries have started this great resignation. I think that's slowing down from what I hear now, though. This is more the start of this year, back end of last year, where this really took off. But yeah, I think that's the reason behind that. What do you think, Phelim?
What do I think? Well, I think you're right. I think people have gone, hang on, I am investing in the future. However, in the future, can I enjoy my investment? Maybe I want to enjoy it now. Why am I investing to retire at, on paper, 67, 70, 72, depends on your age, when I can go traveling around Latin America right now? Because if, hey, I would love to be as healthy at 72 as I am now and be able to really enjoy the Amazon jungle. Love it, right? However, probably not going to be quite the same. So I think that's literally what's happened. Also, a lot of people have thought, stick in a role for 5 years minimum, because otherwise it looks like a squiggly career path. I think people have gone, well, actually, no, that's not true. And I can progress by hopping and gaining extra experiences. And I can go on a sabbatical to Latin America like yourself, and find more about myself. Now, whether or not, and this has been the age-old problem on backpackers and gap year and all of that, right? Well, you come back and everyone's like, "Oh, nice," you think you've got skills to bring to the table, and you do, but everyone else is slightly jealous. So that's the only thing I can envisage being a bit of an issue for people on the great lie down or the great resignation. But on that, on a personal note, because obviously we've done a lot of thematic questions for this interview, what have you been learning on your year abroad that you, not year abroad, but time away, that you think will help you in the security industry when you come back?
Well, that's another great question. I think I've met so many people from so many different backgrounds and income levels, etc., and just always having a kind approach to things and being empathetic. We've met so many amazing people across Latin America, which is very different to the busy London environment and some of the characters you might meet there in what is can be a very competitive and fast-paced place. So getting some perspective on that and realizing some of the things that were happening in London and in the security industry or generally, and getting some distance from that has been quite healthy. So just coming in with fresh eyes again in the new year will be a nice experience and one I'm looking forward to, I'd say. Absolutely,
yeah, and maybe you'll get a role where you have to travel to Latin America, and they'll be like, "Hey, who's been to Buenos Aires?" Me. I don't know if you have. I'm not saying have, but oh, you have. Okay, brilliant. There you go. I think also my Spanish has come to a level where someone said to me the other day I was fluent. So that's another thing I'd like to bring to the table one day potentially is Spanish speaking in my job. That would be fun. So just having like a more global understanding of how the world works and the way we interact. I've also have regular calls into the UK and just understanding how connected we are as well. And to some extent, I feel closer than ever to some of my contacts, despite the long distance. So, and I think COVID taught us that as well. But having felt it with the physical distance from Brazil, where I am now, to London, where most of my contacts are, it's all possible. And that's really nice. And hey, this interview is testament to that. So through the power of the internet, we are chatting to you in Brazil. Right. So what's next for you? What should people watch out for? How can they get in touch if they want to learn more from a YP or next gen, or if they want to integrate a next gen colleague into their team? How can they reach out to you? So on LinkedIn, very responsive. So just Leo Kelly is my name, or via email, kellyleo562@gmail.com. Very responsive there. Happy to talk, and I always love networking in the security industry, so I'm always happy to have a call or meet up to chat. And what I'd say to any aspiring leader to bring in a next gen professional is please consider it, and often it's cheaper because there's less weight of expectation on experience and salary, but there's also a lot of things that the industry can learn from young professionals, and what current trends are, and the state of play in people in their 20s and 30s. So I'd urge all hiring managers to consider young professionals in their decision-making processes. A bargain. Yeah. Great. Well, Leo, thanks for joining us on your travels, and I'm looking forward to seeing you back in London very soon. But yeah, this is a nice look. A slight departure. We've looked at so many topics on the podcast. We've looked at transitioning from the military. We've looked at professional driving protection. We've had a look recently even at industrial psychology under the skin of your team. So yes, why not YP next gen as a topic, and as we increasingly have a wider listenership for the podcast. So from John and myself, thank you, Leo. This has been another fantastic edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast. Well, thank you very much, Leo, and great to hear from you. Obviously, you've been a fixture on the UK circuit, but now great to bring you to the attention of the international community. Young professionals, obviously, I joke all the time, we were all young once. However, we might sometimes forget about the challenges and opportunities that we can have from engaging with the next cohort. John, what did you make of today's session?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, Leo is a young man, he's confident, he's humble. He seems to have his head screwed on very well and has a really great grasp of the industry. He's picked up on the flavor for it, but at the same time, he hasn't been overawed by anything. And he very much knows what he wants to get out of it. I think, it's really commendable.
Which I think it dispels some of the myths that each generation have about the next generation. Oh, the next generation is lazy. The next generation is overconfident. The next generation thinks they know everything. And I think, no, that's not necessarily true. And absolutely, Leo is towing the right line. We mentioned, of course, Leo stepped up to the plate with his team after the very sad passing of Dave Clark, who was the chair for the UK ACES chapter. And actually, that shines a light on whether or not we should all step up to the plate anyway to gain experience of a wider range of sectors. Obviously, we keep on talking about the protector of tomorrow, learning about cyber, not becoming a hacker, about finance, but not becoming an accountant. Do you think there's a good narrative for our audience there, Jon?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, opportunities will come along, and they'll come along in many different ways in your career, and it's as sad of an instance that this was, that gave Leo that opportunity for growth. It's all about how you respond when these moments happen. And you really have to grasp the opportunity and run with it, as Leo really seems to have done. And he will benefit from this in the long run. This will be a great foundation for the rest of his security career.
Absolutely. And hopefully we'll get to follow his path. But yes, if you are a young professional and you don't feel heard, we want to hear from you. If you're a more seasoned professional and you want to think about gelling with different generations in the one team, absolutely, that is something we probably want to cover in a future episode. But Jon, what else have we got coming up? Maybe with the magazine, the app, the podcast. What do we want people to know about?
Well, Phelim, we put out lots of content across lots of different channels, and everyone listening to these words now are certainly engage with us through the podcast. But I wonder how many people who are listening to this also read the newsletter. So for anyone who doesn't know, the circuit also produces a weekly newsletter called On the Circuit. And I would really implore anyone who doesn't subscribe to it already to do so. It's completely free. And what it does is each week it focuses on the events of the week, what's been going on in the security industry. We infuse that with circuit content, so some articles from the magazine, along with reference in the podcast. We make readers aware of new and upcoming events to add to your calendar. And what it does is it just closes the week out really nicely. It comes out rather uniquely on a Saturday, so it's not getting clogged up in your mailbox with anything else. You've got the whole weekend to sit back and enjoy it, either in one go, or in chunks. But yeah, so if you either aren't a subscriber to On the Circuit, then please give it a look. And if you are, then we would be very grateful if you could share it with a friend and help us get the word out there.
Yes, please do. And I do look forward to it, even though, of course, I do in some way help contribute it. I know you're very much leading it, but I do get excited every time it drops in my inbox. And actually, that's a nice segue to talk about you, the audience, enjoying content. I was very recently at the CP World event in London, and many of you stopped by to basically say how much you enjoyed a certain episode. And it was really heartening because I had no idea. And, it was lovely to have anecdotes of, maybe something all the way back to the first ones where we did with Mac and hotel security, all the way through to industrial psychology that we did with Nico and Nicolene Schutter. So thanks very much for stopping by and just, giving us your thoughts, because that really does make a difference. Obviously, we get fan mail if you might not like a topic, but we very much love to hear if you do love a topic. And some of you said also very interestingly that you enjoy the longer form interviews in that you're listening to this whilst you are on task. So if that's you, we're thinking of you. You're probably in the rain, and we're with you along your journey. In addition to that, what we've got coming up, well, I am excited to be going out to Vegas to the IPSB. I know that our dear colleague and friend Elijah is doing the EP Forum this year. That is the 7th and 7th December. And so please do come say hello. It'd be lovely to get a nice cadre of the BBA and NABA community together at the event. What else have we got, John?
Well, I just wanted to add one thing, seeing as I went on so much about the newsletter, and if I have whet anybody's appetite, and they might be wondering, well, okay, where do I find it? The easiest way, as a podcast listener, to subscribe to the newsletter is just to go to whatever you're listening to this podcast through, go to the show notes, scroll down, and you'll see a link to the newsletter in the show notes.
Love it. Yeah, keep looking at the show notes. We do actually put quite a lot of attention to them. So click on that link, subscribe to the newsletter as well. Right. So young professional success. This is relevant for young professionals, seasoned professionals trying to understand their environment and how to integrate them. Thank you very much, Leo. We're looking forward to seeing you back in the UK when you get back here. And I've really, really enjoyed this. Makes me reflect on myself as a young professional. Maybe I still am, maybe I'm not, who knows? And as John said, keeping it young, make sure that you keep your spirits up. So from John and myself, this has been another fantastic edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast.
You have been listening to the Circuit Magazine podcast. Be sure to subscribe and be sure to not miss an episode.